Well, thank you very much. I'm very glad to be here. The title of my presentation is Cybersecurity Defense, Challenges, Trends, and State of the Art. And I was asked by Chris to also talk about this in a federated environment, which I will do. So the agenda that I'm going to speak to is, first we will look at the evolution of the infrastructure, which will motivate why we need to look at things differently. Because we have to keep up with what's happening in the environment around us. As a result of the infrastructure evolution, the threats and the nature of those threats are changing. And I will discuss some of those changes that are occurring, which will then motivate the knowing of unknowns. And I will explain what unknowns are. And most of you are probably familiar with those, but I will summarize our challenges in that section of unknowns. And then at the end, I will conclude with dealing with the unknown in a federated environment and provide a strawman approach to perhaps handling making the unknown known in a complex not only technological but also political environment. Okay, so in terms of infrastructure evolution, the notion today of infrastructure is to provide a robust, secure, and trusted environment. This is key because security always gets put second. It's the availability of services, the robustness that people are delivering to. And so with the awareness of security, it is becoming more in the forefront, so we have some time to work with the infrastructure. But oftentimes we find the train has already left in terms of a project, and security is then called in to say, ooh, what can you do? But I know that there is a thrust towards building a trusted environment where identities are very well identified and you have complete single sign-on role-based access control. Now, why are we doing this? Because obviously we want to deploy new solutions quickly. And it is for the delivery of services that this new infrastructure is evolving. Because the old infrastructure was almost a rip and replace, whereas the new infrastructure is very modular. And so you should be able to deliver services very quickly on this adaptable environment. We have to keep in mind that media and data is not just packets, but also content, as well as it moves, and you are capable of getting access from any place. So voice, video, data, mobility, all on one single environment in a trusted and secure and robust infrastructure. The infrastructure also has to be compliant. There are lots of rules and regulations that the infrastructure has to comply to. The processes have to comply to, such as keeping, your vulnerability updates on your systems and your software up to date, and so on and so forth. Our challenge is to provide operational efficiencies with minimal risk, because we are trying to jam new things very quickly on this common media, whereas we obviously want to provide those services and enable them, but we have to handle the risk in a very robust manner. So what is happening in the infrastructure? And again, some of it may apply here, some of it may not apply today, but will definitely apply in the future, is that the devices are getting richer, more powerful, and convergent. So you're seeing small computers be able to do lots of things, your phone be able to do many more things than just voice. we're also seeing the need for instant gratification. There were days when you could wait for somebody to respond to you via facsimile letters, facsimile, and there was a few days in between. But nowadays, you want an answer right away. And so the infrastructure has to provide that very quick turnaround of information delivery as well as status update. At the same time, because of costs and other models, the infrastructure is becoming a cloud-based infrastructure and becoming virtual and a service. And that doesn't mean that you have to buy a service from somewhere else, but your own infrastructure will look like a service as a cloud. Tools that you're already using that you may identify as, let's say, just email are not just email. They do a lot more than just email. And so with this evolving infrastructure, new threats obviously come in, which one may not think about a priori. Social and collaborative resources are becoming very common and necessary. Not just those in the public environment, but also internal to businesses and organizations. So we will see more of these internally deployed as well to just gain the efficiencies as well as the sharing of information in a timely manner. Now, the way we deliver these types of new messages or content is becoming more complex. It's not just simply thinking about a network or a package or a file. It's actually about rich media delivering using Adobe Flex or Windows media servers where all the information is encoded in certain ways that you may not have thought about before. And hence, from these other types of mechanisms, you have a lot of vulnerabilities that may get created. And again, you don't have a chance to have thought about this when you're building the infrastructure. They evolve very quickly, and you have to catch up. And of course, these devices that everyone is using are becoming very powerful, and there is a consumerization of IT that is taking place. And almost to be competitive, you can't block it. You can't resist it. You have to go with the flow. And so there will be a time when you will have to allow that access, but it'll have to be in some way secure and trusted. So the infrastructure evolution is dynamic, interactive, anytime, anywhere, and real time. And that's what we're dealing with as today's environment going forward. As a result, many new vulnerabilities are coming in. I'm not going to go through all of them. You're all very familiar with them. But as an example, server-side attacks are becoming, more prevalent today. So this is just a statistic from HP's study, which shows on a monthly basis the growth of server-side attacks. And you always have a new type of attack mechanism that gets identified, and then it just tends to grow if it's successful. And this is not something that you could have anticipated. And that's the point with vulnerabilities, that the new infrastructure we're putting in to be competitive is the very source of the attacks, because we cannot control and put a wall around this. Now, why do we have to do this? Because the world is becoming very much driven by now real time. And you want your people to have that access. So a survey by ClearSwift some time ago showed that last year, 87% of office workers access Web 2.0 sites each week. Now, you may have them firewalled off and blocked off, but you are going to be forced into some leakage, or there is definitely some leakage for sure, as well as you might bring that in your own infrastructure. Tools you buy, servers you buy may have these types of dynamic rich content. Okay. 71% of office workers use web-based email at work for personal reasons. This, by the way, for many US DoD organizations and other government bodies that I visit, is a big problem. It's a problem because this is not something somebody is doing maliciously. People simply want to get their work done. And emailing it to Gmail and working at it from home is the most convenient way for them to do so, as an example. And people don't see anything wrong with it. And if they don't see anything wrong with it, no matter what you tell them, and they have to get the job done, they'll find a way. So this is a reality that we must deal with. So with all of this going on, we see lots of news articles every once in a while about data leakage, breaches, information leakage, malware, so on and so forth. And I think I have stopped coming across people who said, we will have a perfect, foolproof solution. I think everybody is now accustomed to the fact that this will continue to happen, and we just need to be proactively moving forward. Now, the biggest challenge for us is that we need to understand whether our information is safe. And even though this article talks about hackers stealing secret Indian documents, which I'm sure all of you are familiar with by now, a small little paragraph down below, or one line, actually has this, which I thought was relevant for you. You know, it says hackers also stole documents related to travel of NATO forces in Afghanistan. Now, you didn't make this happen, but it happened from some other partner. And this is another challenge that you have. And this is the environment. So in this environment, I'm sure all of you are familiar with and have used the state-of-the-art cyber defense and tools. Yet these things continue. So what are these tools? Well, intrusion detection systems, we all have them. We all deployed them. IPSs, again, just an evolution of intrusion detection systems, only as good as the ability to detect. Firewalls, log analyzers, and now it is becoming more common practice to also capture packet traffic, so PCAP data. So this is the state of the art, yet we still have problems. Okay, so now I'm going to go into another survey by Phenom Institute, which shows, you know, what is it that people in the security world are actually thinking. So how many believe in constant threat? They're always under threat. Okay. Well, you'd be surprised to know 1 in 10 actually believes that. Okay. Now you may say, why is that? Well, but that's reality. Okay. Because people will only do or take some actions based on what their belief is about the world. So education is also very important. Now, how many believe in some ongoing threat? Well, 3 in 10. Okay? All right. So 4 out of 10 believe in some sort of threat. Well, how many don't know? Well, 4 in 10 actually don't know whether they are or are not under threat. It's surprising. Okay, well, I counted this up and I said, well, that only makes 8. So what the heck did the other 2 think? So 20% said, I'm not filling it in or something, I don't know. Okay, so now, so Verizon and U.S. Secret Service did a survey this year, or the report is this year based on last year's data, whereby they asked, of records that were breached, how many of them were associated with external agents, outside your boundaries? Well, 70% of records that were breached were associated with external agents. 48% were associated with internal people, personnel, so on and so forth. Now, these don't add up to 100. There are others, of course, because it's a multiple choice. Well, you can pick more than one. So, this could be, well, somebody with the internal and the external combined to breach these records, for example, would be that. Now, of all the records, I think many millions they analyzed, greater than 45% were unknown. So who, how, we don't know. Okay, internal, external, who, what do you know? I have no clue. So this unknown is a big problem. Okay, 4 in 10 say, I don't even know if I'm under attack or not attack. 50% roughly are saying, I don't know how, I don't know what happened, I have no clue. Very challenging situation. Now, how do these attacks occur? Well, there is a list of many. I just picked the top 4. Somebody is privileged to have some information. They misuse that. Hacking, malware, and I think we all know the difference between hacking and malware, but essentially one is waiting in to bait you, and the other one is specifically coming after you. The hackers will, target you. And then social engineering, and so on and so forth. So, now how are these attacks discovered? Again, the Secret Service survey said that most breaches are discovered by external parties. You don't discover them. Someone else discovers that you had a breach. Okay. And here's the shocking part. Only after a considerable amount of time. So it's not like they knew right away that you had a breach and told you. It's some months, maybe years. Oh, you had a breach. Okay, now you know. Okay. So, the unknowns at the time of breach are many. And this is the long problem that many of us are working to solve. The first question, I think, somebody, in the management capacity here would ask if there's a breach would be, when? The first thing. When did this happen? That's the question that comes in my mind. And if you think about it, and you tell somebody about the breach, the first thing they want to know is, when was that? Right? When have you known about it? What did they get? That's the next thing. Okay? So the first thing is when, next is what, and then you want to know the who. Who did it? Okay? And then you come down and say, okay, how? How did this happen? And I think you can all relate to this. Whenever there's a breach, these are the unknowns. This is what you're trying to identify. Okay? Seems simple. This is very difficult, as surveys have demonstrated. Okay? and you probably have experienced. Now, where are these breaches coming from? Well, geographically, you have some chart there. Eastern Europe, Russia, 21%, North America, 19%, East Asia, 18%, so on and so forth, and others. But the surprising thing is this, 31% unknown. That's a lot. 1/3 of geographic origin of breaches, I have no clue. Where did it go? I don't know. You know, that's the most difficult thing to say when you get asked and you say, I don't know. You say, well, what do you know? Well, I don't know anything. You know, I'll go look. That's when everything begins. Now I'll go look. Give me time. I need more time. Okay. Okay, so now even more disturbing is this. 9 out of 10 records breached in 2010 were the result of unknown unknowns. What is this? What this is I didn't even know we had that data. And I didn't even know where it was and how it was connected. Somebody got it. So how could I protect it if I didn't even know it existed? Okay? 9 out of 10. Well, it makes sense. If you didn't even know that it was there, of course somebody took it. So you couldn't protect it in the first place. But 9 out of 10? Okay. Now, the zero-day attacks continue, and this next is a video which runs for about 2 minutes on the, here you have, I'll just let it run. You can listen to it, and then I'll go into it.
Across the country, affected computers in homes, businesses, and government offices were effectively shut down by the latest cyber attack called Here You Have. It prodded recipients to download a message that would then infect the user's computer, attach itself to the user's contact list, and send the virus on to everyone on that contact list. ABC News and the Walt Disney Company were among the many targets, although by the end of the day last week, the virus had been contained. Who was behind it? Writer Robert McMillan of the International Data Group, IDG, first reported the attacker may be a Libyan who posted a video on YouTube taking credit for the massive hack to protest, he said, the U.S. presence in Iraq and the American pastor who threatened to burn the Quran. Joining us now to talk about that attack and others is Richard Clark, a former White House national security official, an ABC News consultant, and author of a new book, Cyber War. What about this attack? Here you have.
Well, this is one of the classic zero-day attacks, meaning it used a technique to penetrate that we had never seen before. And that actually, it occurs very frequently. Almost every day there's a new attack technique. And the signature for that attack is not in the database. So your antivirus, your firewalls, your intrusion detection systems don't see it coming.
The supposed hacker here, a Libyan who claims he's on behalf of Iraqi resistance, says he could have done much worse.
Well, of course it is, yeah. Very frequently these people can take down the system if they want to. They can jam it, they can collapse it. In this case, what he appeared to be interested in was getting passwords. And the system was set up to go in, get your password, and then email it out in a way that you wouldn't see happening to a set of servers outside. And that did happen for many hours before those servers were found and shut down.
Passwords were?
Passwords were definitely exfiltrated.
So the larger picture here for the U.S. government taking a look at this happening?
Well, the U.S. government has to believe that any one of its systems, and our railroads, our banks, our critical infrastructure, can be taken down. The power grid can be taken down.
Okay. So, why did this happen? Now you know the answer. Unknowns. I didn't even know. Okay. So, you know, I thought about this problem a long time ago. I think it was around 2001 or so, as to why this continues to happen. And so, I tried to break this down very simply into what I call knowledge domains. And you probably heard this from others or other places. I'll see what I can do to explain this. You have the domain of the known known. I know what I know. I know those guys are trying to break into that server. I can do something about that, right? I can put alerts, I can watch them, I can put firewall rules, so on and so forth. Then the next level of knowledge domain is the known unknown. I know what I don't know. I know somebody's trying to get at that. I don't know who they are. Okay. I can do something about that. The biggest challenge in intelligence is the last knowledge domain, the unknown unknown. I don't know what I don't know. See? I can never anticipate something that I never even thought about or could think about. Is the unknown unknown. I don't know what I don't know. That is the biggest threat in intelligence. I never considered it. It never came in my mind. It could never happen. I never thought about it. Somebody could do that. After it happens, oh, now I know. But you never thought about it before. So our biggest challenge in security is to make the unknown known. Now, I shouldn't say biggest challenge in security for those that are in this field of, there are other aspects of security as well that are important. I don't mean to disrespect anyone else's field, but this is my field. And in this field of detection, our biggest challenge is the unknown. How to make the unknown known. So, now the challenge is how to get at the data. Now, this is a slide that shows a complex network. Forget about some NIKSUNs up there. I was trying to not violate copyright by taking a picture of Google and putting it in, and I don't have good drawing skills, so I took a marketing chart of a picture that my marketing person had created some time ago. But your network is very complex. Lots of different pieces, lots of different sources of information. And sometimes you even have the challenge of what can I get access to? Can I get those logs? Can I get that information? And even if you can get that information, is it synchronized? Because you also have that challenge. Because events occur very fast, and if you're off by milliseconds, seconds, you're never going to be able to correlate the different pieces of information. So you have many, many challenges. And now, think of this in a federated environment. So who has access to what? Who's going to give you access? Who wants to also know what you're doing? It becomes even more complex. Okay? So making the unknown known becomes even more complex in a federated environment. Because you run into all of this, who has custody of what? Does that tool belong to me? Does that device belong to me? Can I get access to that? Oh no, that's mine, you can't have it. All sorts of things come into play. I've seen that at DHS and other places. So the questions, some of the questions that come forward are, well, who owns the systems? Do you own them? Does someone else own them? Who owns the data? And then who gets what data? Because not everyone should be able to get all the data. So that's the other challenge. And how do you give them the data they want? But remember, we're talking about security, which is as important as your network being out, which means I need it right away. So I can't go and sign a piece of paperwork and come back a few days later and then I get the data. So when do I get the data? And how do I get the data? If I have to wait hours to get access to some packet capture data because I have to download it from there, that's inefficient in this domain. And so some people take also another approach that they put multiple systems to watch the same data. Now I've seen this. We have 4 or 5 similar devices hooked to the same link, let alone a network. Each by different individuals. Now you have intelligence, you have counter-intel, you've got the CERT guys. Everybody wants their stuff, right? Okay. So you then have this challenge becomes even more difficult where, it's not yours. It's many, many people. Who owns this end, who owns that end, and you're interconnecting all sorts of things. So these issues have to be ironed out before. And Chris said, will you talk about that? So I kind of put together a strawman approach to this to say, okay, how can we deal with this? And I'll give an example at the end. So, first of all, the biggest challenge that I see is you got to first fix the data problem. It may sound like more data, but our challenge is we need more relevant data, first of all. Okay? So, to get the relevant data, we need to produce something out of the data. So it can't just be network and TiVo, meaning I have a network. To get relevant data, I'm going to go capture some data from different places. I'm going to record it, whether it be flow data or it be packet data, whatever. But you then also need to Google it. So by that I mean you need to be able to search it. Now, this is the big challenge. This step one is a big challenge. Because either you can collect data this way. Okay? This is like, I don't know, this is not my picture. I just took it off Google. But, it's scattered all over the place. And I know lots of environments where their data is scattered all over the place. It's files. Files and files and files of data. Sitting on servers and storage and archived away here on tapes or storage or on that server there and that server there. That guy's got that data, this one has this data. It's a lot of data. Okay? Or you could organize the data into a warehouse. So either you could keep it the previous way or you could mechanize it, where every piece of data is indexed and is sitting in the right place. Now I can show you that in terms of a database. So I took this picture, a video of a physical warehouse where the robots go get whatever physical inventory you need. And so there's no humans here. It's completely automated. And so everything is indexed. This piece that you want is exactly on that shelf over there, and that's how to go get it. That's a lot of overhead to do, but that's what you need to do in order to find stuff quickly. Okay? So by just collecting files of data and putting them somewhere is not good enough. You have to Google it. And to Google it, you have to organize it. And you have to extract metadata which is linked back to the raw data so you can do deep dive investigations. Okay? So you have to look at the data, you have to extract information from it without losing the original data, and you have to link now the metadata to the data at multiple levels. So you can summarize it, drill down. And I'll show you an example of that. But anyway, so the idea is to extract metadata and organize both raw data as well as metadata. So you need a data warehouse for whatever you're collecting. Okay? This is the key to make the unknown known in a reasonable period of time. Okay. Now, the next challenge is going to be, well, I don't want those guys looking at that data. They can have that data. They can't have that data. Okay, so then we have to implement some way of step 3, based on job and need. So role-based access control on every piece of data. You have to tag it by job or function. Okay. Now, step 4 is, well, how do we get to the data? So we have to build processes for appropriate access to data. So process and technology can ensure appropriate checks and balances, by which I mean Unauthorized access to the data is not allowed. Okay? So, who authorizes you having access to the data? And again, it can't be paperwork. Because if you authorize access to the data, then there is no check and balance. So it has to be somebody independent, authorizing you to look at that data when you need to look at it, but they can't take a lot of time. Okay? So it has to be in some electronic way. And of course, this is a straw man approach, so you iterate this model as you learn more and you refine. So this is an approach to make the unknown known in a relatively quick way. And again, I can only talk about, I am what I know. What I don't know, what I don't know, I can't talk about that. So that's why I can talk about this. So an example of this straw man is something like this, which we are trying to implement here and other places. So let's say that you have an intrusion, there's a dashboard, and Tier 1 is going to be able to look at intrusion alarms. Fine. They determine something to be of a level that needs investigation. So that then needs to automatically be escalated to Tier 2 for deeper dive into the content. So now the message goes over to Tier 2 personnel saying, investigate. They have to get they want to do deep dive analytics. And so they're going to then escalate this. Either they already have access. If not, they're going to escalate the investigation order, receive approval, or collaboration with other parties. Again, you're in a federated environment. You probably have to collaborate with other people who have knowledge. And of course, everything has to be electronic, and all actions have to be logged and recorded. Why is that? Well, because you need an audit trail. So now on this data, we have created metadata, and then we have created role-based access, and we've given the checks and balances. So the Tier 2 now investigates, and this is actually a real, by the way, I forgot to mention, this is a real attack, a real investigation. So now Tier 2 wants to go and verify the attack vector. Okay. So in this case, again, remember, it all has to be point and click. It's not going somewhere else and then, trying to correlate something else. The tool has to do all of this. So they're going to now click and recreate some session and confirm the attack vector. So now they've done that. And further investigation now shows that they are able to find out that, for example, this attack came through a back door. Again, this is a real case study. So now that they have the attack vector confirmed, and they also know there's a back door, they now need to go and pass it on to their malware team, which I'm just calling Tier 3. So now the authorization order tracks to now they're investigating this. Okay? And so we come to their investigation, which now they have to pick up where you left off, or Tier 2 left off. So pointers have to be given to them that say, here's where the case is so far, here's the data that I've been looking at. Remember, here's the events, here's the data. Now you can go deeper into this with authorization. And so now they go in and they discover that the malware came in this particular case via FTP. And they find out exactly how it's executed. So you then have a methodology for creating an analytics system, a solution that allows you to go from detection or failure to detect, from zero-day attacks, all the way to analytics by sharing a common infrastructure, by providing this layer of authorization and access onto this data. And so it's efficient if you do it with the right structures. So the two key takeaways that I would like to leave you with are the following. And again, I can give you many takeaways, you won't remember them, so two key takeaways. So you have to strive to make the unknown known. Remember, that's what you're doing. Your whole goal is, what don't I know, and how can I find out the unknown? And you have to keep that in mind. That's what you're doing all the time. And in order to do this efficiently, the data warehouse and the role-based access become key to getting access at the right time in a quick manner. And that's how you can make the unknown known with adversity where things are changing. Because you're going to need to look at the past. And you're going to need to keep it in a data warehouse so you can interrogate it. If it's gone, it's gone. You need to keep it for some time around. You need to buffer it. Okay, so I was asked to leave about 10-15 minutes for any Q&A, which I've done. I try to keep this at I think a higher level, not go deep into the technology or technical things, but I'd be more than happy to take any questions, either deep, wide, or any other way.
Piatek J, CLD Burnham. Don't you think that with all the cloud computing coming, the strategy that you've just presented might need to be totally redesigned because there will be no longer a requirement for intruder to access our system, while they can go directly to the cloud and obtain not only our information but also possibly our counterparts? Thank you.
Yes. Well, somebody has to be in charge of the security infrastructure of their cloud. So they would have to implement something similar there. Secondly, I don't think in your environment you would be putting something in a true cloud. I know there's work at DISA and other places where they are building their own cloud, which is being designed with these kinds of things in mind a priori. So regardless of going to cloud, virtual computing, or other things, the problem of how to get the data that you need changes or is different because you're in a virtual environment and physical boxes don't work there, so you have to have something virtual to get the data. But getting the data, whether it be within servers or between servers or from one chassis to another, for example, a physical chassis, the inter-chassis communication, or to the control system for your virtual environment becomes an architectural design issue. But the concept, I think, remains the same. And once it's there, I mean, again, maybe I should clarify one more thing, which is the whole intent is to provide role-based access to the data so you and your team could get access to what's yours in that virtual environment. Remember. So there's an overlay of access on top of the data, right? And that overlay may not be mutually exclusive. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, Luke Willems from industry. A question, Doctor, you don't like to answer, but what will be the content of your speech in 5 years?
I don't like to answer. Actually, the content of my speech for the last 10 years has not changed. Some of the slides are still old because I'm working towards one problem, and it's a very complex problem. So I think the nature of the threats will change. The challenge will, of course, be how to move this information quickly. And, of course, there will be people like Keith and others here who will be pressing us for getting even more instant access to information. Because once you have the data like Google, it just opens up the investigation possibilities for you even more, and you want even more. So the fundamental problems, I think, will continue, but it will be about speed of access to more data in a more visual way and no manual way, okay? And I think vulnerability will be important, which is who's got access to the data and how do they get at it, and so on and so forth. So that'll be the next phase, I believe. Because once you've got the large store, there are other questions to be answered, which is, do you keep this distributed or do you centralize it or do you use a hierarchical system? But I think the overall theme still remains the same. I'm working towards the same problem for the last many years. Okay, thank you.
Seems like you're almost off the hook, Doctor.
Well, thank you.
And let me just come around.
Yes, yes. I didn't want to keep people from their flights.
Yeah, well, I can say from the NATO perspective, you know, whether it's updating our defences or briefing the general officers on what's just happened, knowing a little bit more of the unknown is certainly invaluable. You know, it's absolutely essential, and using the full packet type capability has really assisted us. And I'm sure where you all come from, if you're not using it now, then I would certainly encourage you to use that technology, because it does, you know, knowing a little bit more about what you don't know or what you didn't know is just so important. I was going to try and say I don't know what I didn't know, but I'm not even going to go. I'm not even going to go there because I don't know. Dr. Pruthi, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on board. Thank you very much for spending your time with us, for sharing some of your vision, and I do hope that we'll see you again in the not too distant future.
Well, thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Oh.